Well, hello, everyone, and welcome. You are listening to Good Question, a podcast for the curious by Compassion Christian Church. We are so glad to have you guys with us. I am Blair Bauman, and this is Dave Allgaier. Dave, can you give him a little introduction into who you are and kind of your history with faith?
Sure. My history with faith is that, I did grow up going to church, but I felt a closeness to God even when I was very young. And then I grew up as a very unaware person, extreme self-unawareness. And, that journey of faith where you have belief, but you don't have obedience, or you're seeking, just life is confusing, like fulfillment, or you don't really know what to do. I mean, I didn't really have an idea of even who I was. And so my faith journey has to do with being someone who really didn't have any guidance and had an extreme lack of self-awareness. And God did things in my life, and I was brought to different types of crossroads. And so when I was 17, I had a really strange experience where, and I'll speed this up, I'll maybe tell you this experience later, but I had a strange experience that led me to feel deep in my heart that God wanted me to help people. And, with their eternity, right? With things that are ultimately the most important things. And that was 17 when that happened. And then I said, okay, well then I guess I need to get educated. So I went to a Bible college, right? And I didn't know, I was like, I want to go to Bible college for a year. And then I'm going to go somewhere else. And then that was 4 years. I got a degree. Then I'm like, I'm going to go. And I did like ministry all through that. I was like, I was a worship leader at a one church. I was preaching at another church like 4 hours away from where I lived. And I was terrible. I was a terrible preacher. But this church was like in the country. They didn't have anybody.
They were like, it sounds good.
They didn't have, who knows? I don't know what they thought. I mean, gee whiz, it was terrible. But they paid me enough money really to cover my gas. So I don't know why I did it. And then I did other stuff too. I was involved like in homeless ministry since I was 18 years old. So then I was going to go to grad school, and I actually got a scholarship to Pepperdine University. I was going to do law, and I was going to had this kind of weird thing because I met this professor from there, and he did theology and law, and I was like, I'm going to do that. I'm going to do law and theology. I don't know why. I don't even thought that. But again, no guidance, no direction. So I went down to Pepperdine, which is Malibu, and then there's no way I could afford it. I got the scholarship, but I couldn't afford to live there. I didn't know what to do, and maybe if someone would have helped me, I could have figured it out. But so I end up going to Tennessee. I get a degree in I'll make this simple. I get a master's degree. I'm starting a master's degree in divinity, but then I feel like I need to experience a different side of life, and I move into inner city Chicago, where I also am in graduate school in consortium with like Northwestern and University of Chicago and a couple other schools. Anyway, long story short, then I end up with two other degrees, kind of two and a half, like a master of divinity. I end up with a master of divinity with a focus on urban ministry, and then I end up with also a master of arts in Old Testament studies, and then I end up in Mexico. Okay.
Wait a minute. One of the things is not like the others.
No, I mean, yeah. So, this guy had come up. I was doing this inner city ministry thing in Chicago, and it was really a tough season of life. But I had committed to be there, and I was in school full time doing this ministry full time. And this guy came up and goes, "Hey, man, when you leave Chicago, will you help me in Mexico?" And I was like, "Okay, I'll help you. I don't know if I should be doing this. Like, I don't know if I can help. A lot of like, I don't know why you want me, but I'll help you. And if in 6 months you think like this guy is no good, I'll leave. Just tell me. Yeah. Just say, this ain't working out. And if I feel like I'm not like this isn't where I'm supposed to be, or I'm not contributing, I'll tell you and I'll leave." And I was there for like 2.5 years, and then that's when this church called, and that's a long story too, because I said no the first time. And then I ended up coming here.
Thank goodness he said yes later.
That was like that was literally almost 25 years ago because September 16th will be 25 years being here.
And now, what is your role here?
Oh man, so I'm the central. I do Central College. I just moved away from doing overseeing all the campuses, and now I do Central College and young adults. So, and one of the good things about that is I always have a heart for that age group, and also allows for some creativity in teaching and things like that. So I'm actually doing all kinds of weird things. So.
Like a podcast.
Yeah, there you go, like a podcast. Yeah.
Well, guys, I'm Blair, and I guess a quick introduction for me, because I do not have that kind of history.
Yeah, that was a lot.
No, that was great.
Okay.
But I grew up in the church. My father was a preacher, and he went into ministry when I turned, I think I was 6 or 7, so I was pretty young. And life just kind of changed. And to be frank with you guys, what's interesting about this podcast is I haven't really gone through a lot of serious faith questioning, because I always was raised in the church, and I felt like I had kind of that straight path that I knew I needed to be on, and I'm a rule follower by example. So it's one of those things.
Did your
that
friends
really
call you perfect Blair? Oh, there's perfect Blair.
Yes, very much so. I was very much so that girl.
Yeah.
And so
Nobody said
I
that
had
about
never
me.
really had a lot of fighting or questioning in my faith. And to be frank with you, then I went into reporting in news, and my job was to ask questions. And so I started to learn there were a lot of things that I needed to know, and that kind of idea of my faith, and just not really being put through the fire, so to speak, and recognizing how much I didn't know because I just was walking blindly. And so that's why I'm excited about this podcast, is the idea that we get to ask questions and have a comfortable space to come into that questioning, and to have a way to walk through it together out of the kind of murkiness and into some clarity, or some idea that hey, I'm not alone in this.
Yeah, that's actually an interesting, I didn't know that about you. But that's really an interesting point, because there's a lot of different types of questioning, doubt, curiosity, and we need them all. Meaning, no matter which part you're coming from, it's okay. It's good. If you are somebody like Blair who had all this solid, foundation, didn't go through maybe a season of even falling away, then your challenge is that you need to recognize that you're gonna have, even, and this can sound weird, maybe the illusion that everything fits just exactly right in life, and it's not really like that. And so it's almost like you need to be seeking, what do I not know? What have I not thought of, right?
Well, because that one question comes to you from someone else, and it's can send you into a tailspin of oh, I don't know. I don't know how to answer that. I don't know how to respond, because I've never thought about that. Right.
And so sometimes you might not, so sometimes it can help you be prepared if you are seeking, even though you don't have sort of a pain that's driving you to seek.
Yeah.
But also, sadly, sometimes you can get hit with something that legitimately, because you never had these questions before, your faith can actually be rocked and even shattered unnecessarily, because I've never thought of that before, and then your mind goes, wow, what they said, I have no idea how to answer, and it seems like their position is accurate. Maybe what I believe isn't true, and that's a big lie. But it's just that we haven't been in the questioning stage. And then if you're on the other side, where you're somebody who has right now maybe even really struggling with questions, the solution is sort of the same. It's look, there, we'll talk about this, but there is, there are answers, and there are also directions, and there's also guidance. So even sometimes when somebody can't give you a sentence that clears up all your answers, which, by the way, life has many things where you can't just tie it in a bow.
Yeah.
And but there are things that are so true and solid that then, again, we'll get into this, but regardless of who you are, whether you're struggling or whether you're not, we want you to be curious either way. It's healthy.
Yeah. And so, you guys, I'm sure you picked up on this. We are new to a podcast. So we're asking for some grace, some understanding that we are learning as we go. And we would love your feedback as we go through this, because we're going to try and do this so that it's a beneficial resource, and also a place where if you have questions, man, we want to tackle some of those. So let us know.
Right.
Keep in the loop with us and stick with us as we figure out what this all looks like. But today, we want to essentially explain the goal of this podcast, which we've done a little bit, but also the concept behind it, because we know that walking in faith can be a challenge, and it's something that has to be a daily decision and also a progressive decision. And we have to adapt as we go.
Well, and let me just jump in
Yeah.
and say too, when you said walking in faith can be a challenge, I mean, even recently, I mean, there's things going on in the world and people are feeling pain and struggle and suffering and questions. Not only is it a challenge though, but walking in faith, there's more than what people realize, I would say. The journey of the Spirit, which is seeking God's face, seeking the Spirit, finding ways, struggling through ways to somehow let God come more into your life, and that comes through a little bit of instability. Okay, like even prayer itself is unstable. We want to think it's all like really simple. You sit down and you say stuff to God. It's not really like that. You kind of have to struggle through it. You kind of have to learn. So I just want to say that it's not just the difficulties of faith; it's also the opportunity. There is so much more. If you're listening to this, there are things God sort of wants to give, and to do that, you gotta kind of have to explore a little bit and try some different stuff, and also just go a little deeper, take a few risks,
Be vulnerable. Yeah. Well, every episode, we're going to focus on a new question and discuss some of the challenges and the path forward with those questions. And we want to be able to do this together. I'm learning along with you. And so it'll be a fun process, I think. And also just a chance for us to really do this in a safe space, to feel comfortable, like we're not doing it alone. Because the truth is that we are never in this alone. So know that first and foremost in this discussion.
Right.
But I do want to share a tweet that I saw literally last night. It's from Jackie Hill Perry, and it says literally this: while reading the Psalms, I'm struck by how often God is questioned, why he's allowing this, why he's forsaken that. Suffering makes you curious, and to me, it seems being inquisitive is in fact a healthy part of prayer. Even Jesus, in his dying hour, asked God a question. I mean, we can see that in Matthew 27:46 when he says, my God, why have you forsaken me, right? So questioning is something that I think oftentimes in society we think proves doubt or insecurity, or it's considered sometimes bad, or you are pushing boundaries when you're questioning. And I think the first baseline is we have to be okay with asking questions and saying, I don't know. And being willing to start that conversation.
Yeah, and there's a lot to say about that. Like, I think about this a lot. Like the great meta narrative, and what I mean by that is the overarching story with doubt in the Bible is, and it applies to every single human being. And boy, I mean, I think about this almost. It hits me almost. Maybe I'll say every other day. I wanted to say every day, but in some form, is a story of the Israelites coming out of Egypt, going through the wilderness, and then into the Promised Land. That's actually how faith works on a daily basis, and on a weekly basis, and a monthly basis, and a yearly basis. Because you go from, and the Bible even says this. Like, there's a line, I'll have to look it up, but it says that we go from faith to faith, and faith to faith means it's from one place of faith to another place of faith, and to get to the other place of faith, there's like sort of not no faith, but there's uncertainty, right? Yeah. Faith to uncertainty to more faith. And that's the story of the Israelites. They're in a place of oppression, but there's certainty. We know how, in fact, they, at one point in the wilderness, they want to go back to that certainty, even though it was bad. Even though they were enslaved, they want to go back. At least we had certainty. Remember? They were like, you've let us out here to do this, and at least we had this to eat and that to eat. They want to go back to slavery, but at least they had certainty. But God,
and Moses was pretty desperate in that time too, that they were throwing all those questions at him. He was like, hey God, you left me out here. Like, well, sure. How am I doing?
The whole story of Moses is one of uncertainty. God's like, you're going to go lead my people. No, I'm not. I can't do this. I can't do that. I can't do that. And, we won't parse through that text, but the whole time he's he ends up having to just place himself in God's hands and not rely on his own leadership and ability, right? And it was ultimately what we all have to do. But anyway, so the Israelites go and they're in the desert, and not for 4 days, right? Not for 40 days, but for 40 years.
Years.
And there's generations that pass, and they have to live. He has to do this, and I heard something recently about this. Corporately, he had to do this because when people come out of oppression, it takes about 3 generations to kind of not have the same mentality you had when you lived under oppression, to be sort of have a freedom mentality. And so 3 generations did pass, in that 40-year time period. God was having to deal with Israel on a corporate level, but then they're all having to pass through. I mean, they're like every day, like they have to wait for food to show up on the ground, right?
Yep.
And then we get all the way to the Lord's Prayer, and the very center of the Lord's Prayer is, give us this day our daily bread. And that's not just about food. That's about anything we're uncertain about. Like faith means I'm relying on God every day, and I just have to choose to do that. And that comes with information too. Like there's things is there really a promised land? Is there really this? Or we're doing the same thing. Like we live in these wildernesses all the time. We pass through them all the time.
Yep.
We have, and suffering is probably the biggest one, because when you're hurting, you don't know how long it's going to last. You don't know how you're going to get out of it. When someone you love is hurting, you don't know how long it's going to last. You don't know if they're going to get out of it. And then you start to feel also, is God even noticing this? Is he even here? And so, anyway, yes, this is when she's talking about the Psalms, these questions have been, the Bible is telling us, like, we know how it feels. That's what the Bible's saying. Someone else wrote at one point, there's no question or accusation you can make that the book of the Psalms did not already do, or the Bible did not already do. Go read Job and look at, God saying, look, I can take it. Be honest with me. And there's a path through this. And that path is from faith to faith. There's a greater experience with God's Spirit if we don't just hold on to, if we let go a little bit and seek.
And
right?
I think, like, truthfully, I think God wants us to ask those questions. I think he wants our true and intentional heart to be like, here's where I'm at, here's what I'm struggling through, because until we sometimes name it, we can't walk through it. And so I think it's one of those things where he is asking us to be real with him, to be authentic in what we're going through, so that he can help reveal a way through, or a person, provide the person to be able to speak to that, or whatever that looks like, to get you through to his side of understanding, or even just comfort about where I'm landing.
Yeah, it's not just about understanding. This is like something I think is really important to hear. When you have friendships, okay, when you are really close to somebody, like there's people you can go to coffee with and you don't need to say anything because you're just fulfilled being with them, right? Because you have a bond. Why do you have a bond? And so I'm asking you a genuine question.
Yeah.
Why do you have a bond with that person?
Because there's a history there. There's a connection. There's
a history there, and they don't just talk about the weather, right? It's the friends that come and say, I'm struggling. They're really open. They're vulnerable. And then they receive love and acceptance from you, even though they have been truthful and vulnerable and have told you things where you could have rejected them. But instead of rejecting them, you love them. So in other words, they're known but loved. And you are known but loved and accepted. That is what this is about. Like, we can't get a deeper connection with the Lord unless we let ourselves be known and then loved.
Yeah, that's good.
I'm a little bit tenderhearted today, just from some circumstances, from stuff in the world, but we have a chance by being honest, because God knows our hearts anyway, with him, to feel his love and presence in a greater way. And it's sort of right now, I'm saying this as almost a cry to people, like, you gotta go there, because you will experience God in a way maybe you didn't even know was there or possible, because you've been attending things or just, kind of doing kind of a religious walk. There's a beautiful deep connection available. There's more.
I love that. Thanks for sharing that. And to be truthful, we've used this analogy before, you and I, Dave, of the idea of walking in faith is this idea that we are driving in fog, which is common here in Georgia, in the mornings.
In certain places, yeah.
In certain
I'm
areas.
from Seattle. It's everywhere. You can't even see sometimes in the mornings.
So if you're driving through fog, oftentimes you can't see the road ahead of you or necessarily the lines or what's around you at all times, but there are ways to see through that fog, whether it's the headlights in front of you or the taillights of someone in front of you, a rumble strip on the side of the road. There are ways to make sure that you're still on the right path. And that is what we're kind of trying to figure out, is like making sure we don't get lost in the fog and that we stay on the road.
Right. And so the key with that too is we all want the fog to go away and we want to see things super clearly. And in the end, however, there are things that are super clear, okay, and super proven and things we can rely on and things that will hold us up, while at the same time there are things that we can't see so clearly and we are in a fog. And so again, it's like driving in a car. You can't see the lines, you can't see the side of the road, and maybe it's even a dangerous situation. Maybe there's a cliff on one side. How do you survive that? Well, there's a truck in front of you, a big semi-truck, and it's got headlights, and you can't even see the truck, but you can see the headlights. And so you just follow that. And God always provides that. He always provides that kind of guidance. So even though it's not clear, things like his promises in his word, that he's with us and that he'll provide and that he's given us a path to seek him and that he's given us friendships and he's given us other things. Or even, an example of how this would matter. I had two friends whose children, died in the last, 4 years. And, what are you going to say? Something certain to them like, oh, don't worry, God has a plan or something.
Yeah.
That doesn't work. Like, no, it's look, this is foggy, this is painful, I don't know what this feels like. There are things like your child, there are certain things, your child has an eternal soul and we'll see each other again. But either way, I'm going to be with you right now. There are simply foggy times. And in those times, God, though, has provided a way for us to follow.
And we need to look for the light sometimes, right? Like when we're in the fog, that's when it's most important for us to kind of, I don't want to say grip tight because that's not a good analogy, but it's like we need to hold fast and pay attention to put our eyes towards the light so that we're looking in the right direction instead of being focused on the fog.
Yeah, absolutely. And, super fast things about that. One, I think grip tight on the things that we know for certain, because when we have doubts, what we often do, we might have 100 things that are certain and we're certain about, and then we have a doubt, and our minds tend to preoccupy ourselves on the doubt, and then the doubt becomes the big thing when it's 1 out of 100.
Right.
So no, we do need to hold fast and hold tight to the things we're certain about, and that gives us the ability to then to deal with that doubt straight head on and just confess it. I don't get this. I don't understand what in the world's going on. Lord, help me. And he does.
I'll be with my unbelief,
Right. Help, I believe, help my unbelief. Exactly. Just like it says in the word. And then the lights are things that he does bring to us. I mean, we don't always have them right away. We don't know where they are. We find them. They tend to come in the form of other people who speak into us. They tend to come in the form of, a sense of God's presence. And then also, maybe this is the biggest one, this is the starting place, and this is where I always go, and there's certain places I go. They tend to come in the form of promises God has made. And then we have to just sort of say when we read that, like 1 Peter chapter 5, every other day, it says, humble yourselves therefore before the Lord under God's mighty hand, and he will lift you up in due time. And it's like, okay, do I believe that? Because ultimately now this is about believing, this is about faith. Yeah, I do. I'm going to choose to. No, I don't. But yes, I do. Okay, I'm going to choose to. And now we have now we have these lights we're following, and God brings us to clarity. He brings us out of it through it. Because again, in that analogy, you're in Egypt, you're through the wilderness, but the promised land is there. And we go through those three places continually in our lives.
Well, that's a great place for us to start, you guys. We hope that you will continue to join us with love and curiosity in your hearts as we navigate good questions one at a time. So thank you guys for joining us for our very first episode, and we'll see you soon.
See you soon.